Hi Flosstube, it's Arlene here. It is Saturday, June 6th, and I know that because I was reading this morning that it's the 76th anniversary of D-Day, when the Allied forces invaded France. I guess was invaded and led toward the ending of World War II, and how the typical, you don't say celebrations, ceremonies, the honoring of this day, very different this year because of the pandemic going on, and that those who would typically honor this day and the very few soldiers that are still around who would normally, even as old as they are, would normally travel, it's not happening. Anyway, all this stuck in my mind that I was able to tell you that it was June 6th without actually checking the date. Thank you for coming by. Thank you for being here with me. I have to say what's what. I think for many of us, the last couple of weeks have been quite challenging and different. And I have a few things I want to share, but I also know that if you are here, if you've clicked on Flosstube, if you've clicked on me, perhaps you're here because you need a little respite from what's going on. And that's part of self-care, and that's part of what's needed. So I'm going to save my thoughts on that topic towards the end. So if you want to peace out, that would be fine. So I'm going to stick with needlework at this point because that's what I figure. Again, if you have chosen to click on me, my video, any Flosstube video at this point, that's what you're looking for right now. So I'm going to go with that for the moment. So again, so appreciate you being here. My last video was 3 weeks ago. Thank you all so much for those who participated in celebrating my 3-year anniversary of WorksByABC and bought patterns for me in these last few weeks. I so appreciate that. I am going to start out with, I have a big finish, ladies and gentlemen. I know in my last video I wondered out loud whether, what was my time frame, when was I going to, could I finish, and so on, and I was sort of surprised once the days came along and I realized, So this project, which I started on February 29th, which was just a convenient day that it's just a date that was easy to remember, although it did turn out I was sort of joining by default the Leap Day Start Sal or Leap Day Start Sal, whatever it was. I just happened to be starting on that date, February 29th. I finished this on Monday, June 1st, so just a few days past 3 months, which I never would have predicted I would have been able to do that quickly, given the size of this project. Thanks, COVID-19. Thanks for the time. While there has been lots of stress and lots of uncertainties and a lot of this is not normal for everyone, the way my life has changed up in the last few months, as has everyone, as I've shared, has allowed for some extra stitching time and frankly has wanted me to channel that. It's been a combination. It's been a project that I've loved to work on, and I've had the time to channel that need for distressing to it. So without further ado, I share with you my completed, get it all in frame here. I am, there we go, trying to not be crooked. I am calling this Heirloom Lace. It is based on a real piece of lace, something that I imagine was probably designed for a small table, like maybe a small end table. It's not a huge piece, the actual piece that I have, but I loved the effect of two different light and dark. That's not the right words. But I wanted to see if I could replicate that in thread for cross stitch, and that's what I've done. So as I've shared about this in the last couple of videos, what you're seeing is sort of like the solid areas, are full crosses that are done in floche, and the lighter areas most clearly seen here, but also as highlights and in the border as well. So these areas right here are actually a tent stitch, so half a cross stitch. Where am I? There we go. Half of a cross stitch or a tent stitch using one strand of DMC, floss, one strand of floss. And I meant to bring up a hank of floche for you to see it, and I forgot, but I know I've shown it in other videos, so you could go back and watch like my last video. So if you're not familiar with floche, it is a beautiful thread to work with. It is one strand, I believe you could sort of say, is sort of the equivalent of 1.5 to 2 strands of floss. Don't quote me on that exactly, but what it allowed for is excellent coverage on 36 count using only one strand. And I was feeling like being a little lazy. It's not lazy to say that. It's just sort of saying that I wanted to stitch using one strand. I just knew that it would be quicker and easier and would look nicer. And this is a way to do it. And I knew even going up to 40 count, I wouldn't be able to get the same coverage, but more importantly, I wouldn't be able to get as nice of contrast between the light and dark areas. The fabric is a silk weaver fabric in the color called Crushed Cranberries. I 99% sure that I had to get a fat half because it did not, no, this is definitely not a fat quarter. This is a fat half that I've cut. And I only cut it to fit on my the scroll bars that I was using because a fat quarter, I can tell you how I know what size it is. So in addition to actually showing you my finish, I am announcing that the pattern is now available on my Etsy store. There are links below. I sell all of my patterns, including this one, in 2 different ways. So I have both links down below. You can either buy it as a paper pattern like this that I will mail to you, or as a PDF that you can download immediately. Both options are there. On 36 count, it is 16 inches by a little over 14 inches. So one thing just to comment on, now that you can see the whole thing, it is not a perfect square. It is slightly rectangular. And so, which is to say it has 2-fold symmetry, not 4-fold. 4-fold symmetry would be if you could take like a quarter like this and just reproduce it. When I was working with that actual piece of lace and realized that, I think what happened, what made me realize it, is that one day I was focusing on, a flower like this area let's say, I think I was focusing on the top, and then when I went to look at the lace, I saw that the flower here was not identical. It's close, but it was not identical. And then I started to study the piece as a whole. I did contemplate just making it a perfect square and giving it that 4-fold symmetry, but I decided no, that I have enough pieces that are perfect squares and that I wanted to do it something like this. So it is a rectangle. It would not be impossible if somebody really wanted to. No, don't quote me on that. I was going to say it would not be. Never mind. So I did chart it as the lace was, which is to say as a rectangle. And I hold it this way. I suppose you could do it more that way, but to me, my eyes, I've stitched it like this and my eyes go to it like this. It is in my plan to get it professionally framed. We're here in New Jersey and things have not opened up yet. June 15th, which is 11 days, 9 days, whatever, is when stores, like not what they call non-essential retail stores, are supposed to be allowed open, at like 50% capacity, blah, blah, blah. I did look at the website of the framing place that I have used for my last few important, big, need to do it right kind of professional framing place. They seem to be like they will, what can I say? They seem to have not gone out of business. And I'm just going to hope they're going to be able to open up. And I'm not in any rush. At some point, I will get this professionally framed. And, I'll show it to you when it is. All right, so back to talking about the pattern. So the pattern is available. And I just wanted to say it here. It is also written on the back about thread amount. So I know I had commented definitely on Instagram, and I think I talked about my video here. I was going to be very curious to know how much flourish I was going to end up using. I had purchased 4 hanks of it, having no idea how much I would use. And also because online, I could not find a definitive answer. Some sources say a hank has 150 yards, and some sources say it has 168 yards. And it just seems like one source ends up copying from another source, and you don't really know. The DMC website, which you would think would be the be-all end-all of definite information, doesn't show you flourish. So that's not helpful. So whatever you believe, 150 yards, 168 yards, not important enough for me to undo the whole thing and actually measure it. I'd bought 4 of them. I knew by a certain point that there was no way I was going to need 4 of them. I was questioning whether I was going to need 3 of them. The answer is I nearly used up 2 of them. Another thing I forgot to bring up here is I was going to show you how much I had left of the second one, and it's about 4.5 yards. That's all I had left of the second one. So what I have written on the back here, if you choose to use flourish like I did, I've written this, I nearly used up 2 full hanks. To anyone who's choosing to stitch this design using flourish, I would suggest having a 3rd hank on hand in case your stitching style differs from mine and your thread usage is slightly more. Because all it takes is, you doing your X's slightly different than mine, and every X, uses up that tiniest fraction more, and it all adds up, and you need a few yards into a 3rd hank. Now, I ordered my flourish through an Etsy store. There are some brick and mortar stores that are selling some flourish. If it is something that you want to try out, there are sources to get it out there. It's not the most common thread to find, but it certainly can be found in the US. If it's not your thing, I have written that I think the same effect could be achieved using 2 strands of floss, for the solid areas, which for some people might be more than what they want to stitch on 36 count. But if you're trying to go for a solid look, so you could use 2 strands of floss for the main area and then the 1 strand tent stitch for the lighter areas. Totally up to you. But I have estimated if you choose that, you might need 16 to 18 skeins of DMC floss. All the information, sizes of the finished size and everything will be on the Etsy listing if you are interested in getting this. Now, last time, my last video, I had said that for the time that I I didn't call it a reveal, whatever I called it, for when the pattern was ready to go, I would be giving away a couple of copies of the pattern. So, and if you've seen me do giveaways before, well, number one, I don't do it that often, so it's not a big deal for me to do this. But I go old-fashioned. We as stitchers, by the mere fact that we do things with our hands, of course, we use technology. You're watching me right now. You use technology, okay? But I know how to use a random number generator. I know how to do those things. But I also like the paper slips in a bowl. And so I figure if I have to take the time to like cut and paste names and put them in an Excel spreadsheet and do a random number generator, or like I can't use the YouTube comment thing because not everyone enters the giveaway, that's fine. I might as well just handwrite the names down anyway. Okay, so I am doing nicely mixing them up. I'm gonna pick 2 winners to get a free copy. So the first winner is Marie Hahn. And the second winner is Lynn, I think I cut off a Y there, Lynn Boyson. So For Marie and Lynn, I will comment on your comments in my last video, or if you're seeing this before I remember to do that, feel free to be in touch with me, worksbyabc@gmail.com, and whichever way you want it, a paper copy that I'll mail to you or a PDF copy, I'll be getting that to you. And for anyone who is interested, again, the links to my Etsy store where you can get this, the pattern, are down below. So when you have, I'll say when you have a finish, when you have a big finish, I suspect I'm not alone in saying that I had a stitching hangover. And that was partially this week. So I finished this on Monday, June 1st. And I have been a little frustrated in that I know exactly what I want to start next, and I'm waiting for fabric to arrive. And, it's just a little frustrating when you have an email from May 18th that says it will be shipping in 2 to 3 days, and you still don't have it. It will be another new design of mine. I gotta say that I loved that I was sharing on Instagram and the couple videos I did while I was stitching this. I know it's not common designer practice to share, you wait and have a big reveal when your patterns are done. But it certainly helped me to keep going when I was doing this. So I don't know, because the next project is not as large as this, but it is a larger size project. I don't know. We'll see how I feel in terms of sharing once I get started with it and either get my fabric or come up with plan B for my fabric. So, but I can't let a day go without stitching. And I didn't want to start anything else. I know exactly what I want to do next. So I don't have that many whips that float around in my world, but I did pull out one of the few things I do have available to me. This is one of my patterns called Color Thesaurus. I have almost exclusively only worked on it at retreats and stitching group gatherings, which it's a perfect project for that. But I have been working on it this week, and I just thought I'd share with you where I am with it. So it has 9 colors: red, pink, purple, blue, green, yellow, orange, brown, and gray, and then 9 different shades of each of those. You follow me there? And I decided to start, not quite in the middle, but not at the top is what I could say. And so here are the 9 purples, the 9 blues. I finished the last 2 blues this week. I got the framework in for some of the greens. I will stitch on it tonight and tomorrow, unless by some miracle my fabric shows up today. And start working a little bit into the greens. And it's only on scroll bars this large because these were the scroll bars I was using for my Heirloom Lace project. And in the spirit of laziness, I was like, I'll just put it on the same ones. But that certainly doesn't need to be on this size scroll bar. So just a little update. I don't have a clue when the last time you guys saw that. But there it is, Color Thesaurus. And, because I don't work on it that often, it's a very long-term project. Someday it'll get done, and it'll look beautiful when it's done. It's just very much a long-term project. Okay. Next on the list. In my last video, when I was doing a little bit of talking about some of the books on the shelf behind me, I shared a book which was the way I learned about tatting. And from that, a couple of people had some questions about tatting, and I just wanted to share a little bit more. I know how to tat. I don't really have an active project going right now. It is not something I do that often, but tatting is, I will claim, the most portable craft that exists out there. You could take a little pouch like this size and be carrying around everything you need. So there's been different times in my life that it has been I've had projects on the go or not. But I just thought I'd share a little bit with you, a little bit more about some of the things that I have in front of me. So one thing I pulled out, and I can date this soon, like when I moved to New Jersey. So this wasn't that long after I learned about tatting and started it. Like literally a couple days after my move-in date, I was, boxes all over the place, and I'm so tired of dealing with all this. And I just got in my car and decided to just drive a little bit and figure out where the stores were and stuff. And I ended up, turning off the main road into an area that looked like a, big shopping center. Let me see what's here. And there was a Borders bookstore. Borders, sadly, is long gone at this point. But I remember going into that Borders and going over to the craft section and actually finding some, not many, but some books on lace and tatting. And I bought this one. So again, I can date this as just, soon after I moved here. And this, like a number of the tatting books that do exist these days, it's a reprint. It's a Dover Publications reprint of an original, this Dover edition, first published in 1977, is an unabridged republication of a work first published in 1915. So you get things that, the pages look like this. And I remember, it's the centerfold. I remember seeing this and just thinking, wow, that looks beautiful. Now, nowadays I feel like I've seen a lot of other things that look more beautiful to me, but I remember at the time loving this and deciding, hey, I'm going to do it. It sounded crazy, but I'm going to do it. Yeah, you want to see how far I got with it? And then it'll also show you how big this thing actually is, because I had no sense of how big it was. Now, I know I think this is called like crochet thread, but it's like the finest kind of crochet thread. And of course, I don't know how this actually compares with, 1915 thread. But I had it, and just for you guys, I actually like steamed it because it was all kind of bunched up in a little baggie. But here's how, and I feel like I had this as a travel project for quite some time. This is how far I got with it. And like the medallions that are around the edge, how do I do this to keep it flat? The medallions that are around the edge, which are just like hanging out on their own, in the next go around, they would start to get connected to one another. So right now they're kind of hanging loosely, but they would start to get a motif that would connect them, okay? And you could see I basically need one more of those medallions to finish this round, this circle. I can't hold this very well. And then I would be starting the next circle around. Okay. Now, I don't know if I can hold this book up at the same time. Okay. Now, I can't point this out in the same way. Can you see? All right, I got to use a hand. What I have completed of this thing, those medallions that I still have one more to go, is this part right here. Okay, so now do you see how big this thing is? This is supposed to be like pieces of fabric, like linen fabric that you would sew in. Okay, this is not going to get done. And again, I can say, and I'm going to show you something in a minute, there are things that I think are more beautiful. If I were going to do a large tatting project, I think there are other things that I would put my time toward. There was also something, something sort of, I don't know, elegant or quaint or something about doing something that had been created 100 years ago, following a pattern that had been created 100 years ago. And that has its charm. But the size of this, yeah, no. This is a book, pull this one off the shelf, that I believe you can still get through Joann's. I'm pretty sure it's where I got it. If you are interested in learning how to tat, you can certainly find plenty of videos online, no question about it. This one came out, I don't know when it came out, but the neat thing about it is that there's a DVD. Now, I don't think I've ever watched the DVD. I know, because I saw someone who had it and we were watching her DVD, and it made me want to get a copy of it. I just wanted to show you that I didn't do like the basic exercises through it, but this, daffodil doily. I did. And, you know, one question I get a lot with lace, and now I'll probably get it with tatting, is, well, what do you do with these things? I could, you know, put it in a frame and have it as a really nice decorative thing. I admit I haven't. I have this one I haven't even finished off, meaning dealing with the ends. There are ways to deal with the ends to make it look nice. There we go. But I never did that. So this one just sits. This would look nice, like in a small square frame, and joining like some of my other lace pieces that hang on the wall. I just haven't. I remember doing this and loving the challenge of it, particularly because I didn't have a pattern. I had a picture. I couldn't find the picture, which drove me crazy, but I couldn't find it. But I had seen a picture somewhere online, did not have a pattern, but I wanted to do it. And it required using 4 shuttles instead of 2. And you had to do it at the same time in order to get them to interlock. You had to, like, you know, for blue and ecru is what I was doing. You know, you had to do a blue, and then you had to do the ecru, and then you had to interlock them as you went. And that meant keeping track of 4 shuttles. And again, I haven't finished off the ends. What would I do with it? I don't know. It's just part of my pile. Now, I do have, just very quickly, you know, what can be done. Here's a book that I have, a collection of snowflake designs. There was one year that I made, not from this book, but from a similar source. How can I? A few of these kind of things, and use some like spray starch kind of stuff. So they got a bit stiffer, and then gave them to a number of friends as Christmas ornaments. And I loved, that was just, to me, it was I really liked doing that. That was in my early years of tatting. It was really, you know, so something like this is a great thing to do for tatting. And then the last tatting thing, and I know I showed this, but it's worth showing it again. Last summer, I purchased a Momely bag, which comes from Emily C. Eclectic Possessions. And this was specifically because she had found some fabric, and we were in touch, and I said, yeah, I would buy a bag from you if you made it with this fabric. And they're all lace pieces, most of which are, I mean, they look like tatting, although some of them look like they're really not possible to create. As I look at it from a tatting perspective eye, or like I don't know what would be going on in those center areas from a tatting perspective. But when she brought it to me, which was at the New Jersey retreat, I had prepared myself ahead of time, and I brought with me tatting shuttles and some thread. So this is what a tatting shuttle looks like. I mean, there's all different kinds, but this is the base, you know, the basic idea. And I was determined to see if I could recreate one of the pieces, and I just picked a small one. So I was trying to do this one, and here is the little piece that I created. And what I discovered is that I couldn't do it perfectly, and maybe my thread just wasn't the right size. This one has, I think, 12 loops, and I could only get 10. Otherwise, it wouldn't stay flat. But it was just sort of a fun little exercise to see if I could do it, and I did. So here's a little bit about tatting today, just to share. All right, let me get this out of my way. Last time, I had pulled some books off my shelf and just had a little book conversation, and thank you to those who commented how much you enjoyed that. And as much as reasonable or timing wise would allow, I think it'll be a fun thing to do for Flosstubes, is just to see what I'm inspired to talk about from my bookshelves. I had a great, helpful comment. One of the things I showed you, can we see it? Yeah, we can. No, wrong way. There, right there. That small little green book was my older copy of that book right there, and complete Encyclopedia of Needlework. And that edition was from 1912. And a comment from Poppy Thistle. So the thing about my book is it had said in the front, Sister's Room. It was inscribed that in the front, and I had wondered aloud whether it had belonged at some point in its life in a convent for the sisters. And this, I loved learning this. So from Poppy Thistle, she wrote, another possibility for Sister's Room would be nursing sisters. Until the late 1960s, nurses were often called sister in the British and the Commonwealth military. The head nurse was matron, and she had sisters who reported to her. Often there was a library in the sisters' residence, as they were not permitted out except for a few hours on Sunday to visit family when not working. My her grandmother, graduated in 1926, and she worked 14-hour days, 6 days a week. They had a 2-hour break in the afternoon to rest. She does say, dated 1912, that's my book. That would be pre-World War I, very restrictive, as nursing only became shortly before that an honorable profession. I am a third-generation nurse. I should add, quite often British nurses are sometimes still referred to as sisters. We dropped that in Canada after World War II. So that new information to me. So another possibility certainly is that instead of sister's room in a convent, it totally could have been sister's room in a nurse residence. Thank you so much for that information. Love learning new things. I pulled off my bookshelf today, and I don't know, I think I might have shown this at some point, but I think I know why I might have shown it, but if not, you might be interested in it. I have a dear, dear friend. She's older, and anyone we know who's of an older generation, we certainly worry about in these times when, we're told the concern, especially it's an older generation that we're especially concerned about when it comes to this virus. Anyway, someone who's very dear to me. A number of years ago, she was traveling to Italy, and she was, for part of that time, she was visiting her cousin, some relative, who had just purchased had purchased a house, maybe like a bed and breakfast or something equivalent to that in Italy. And some of the furnishings had come with the purchase. And she had found in a dresser of sorts these books and was going to get rid of them. And my friend said, I know someone who would love that. And so she took them and she sent them to me. So there's two of them. DMC Hardanger booklets, or at least types of stitch. I shouldn't say Hardanger. Types of stitching, some of which are, that page I just opened up to clearly looks like Hardanger. But I think there's some variations of it that doesn't make it definitely the Norwegian, the country of origin of Hardanger. This might be, no, it says Norveski, which is probably Italian for Norway. Anyway, I can hold these up. And there's a lot of pictures, but many of something like this, if you know what you're doing, you could recreate it just from the picture. But there are some pages of instructions, but not that many. And I think the reason why I thought I might have taken these off the shelf at some point, I mean, it's all in Italian, the pages that are there, is the time that I learned that these old DMC publications, I think I'm saying this right, which often don't have copyright dates. It's just from before things like that were labeled as such. You can date them if they have a marking like this, with small little numbers that are often found either on the title page or there, something like that. And that would mean that this one was published in April of 1924. 424. And the other one I have, which is the cover's falling apart, so I'm just going to take the cover off, is got 613, which would mean it was published or printed on in June of 1913. And it's not the same book, it's a very similar book. It's got different projects in it, different pictures, but very similar, the same type of stitching. And when my friend gave these to me, you know, these kinds of things are a treasure. I was able to, without too much difficulty, find the English versions of them. These are obviously much, much later. Let's see if these have, oh, so even following that labeling, this would have been printed in May of 1962, for example. So not that I think that I'm necessarily going to do any projects from them, but I do have the much more modern, and I could use it without feeling like it's going to come apart in my hands, versions of these two books. And I just love having these kinds of things. I think they're special. Plenty of the books on my shelf are resource books, are ones that I turn to when I'm looking for new stitches or new ideas or what have you. And there's some that, you know, barely are going to come off the shelf. They're just treasures, and I just want to have them. And, you know, these are an example of that. So when I went looking today of what books could I share, these are the ones that I decided to share for today. I could make a whole video just sharing books. And I suppose if I get to a point where there's been too much time since my last Flosstube video, I got to remember that. That's just a good thing to do for a Flosstube video when I have nothing else to show. I got to remember that. Okay. Moving on. Let me just move some things out of the way here. I want to share with you this. So let me say right now, I want to share some things about the most recent couple of weeks. Just some thoughts and some stuff. If you want to peace out at this time, go right ahead. But I hope many of you will just listen and share. The first thing is very much stitching related. I created this last Saturday, a week ago, just with a heavy heart. Not so much what can I do, because there's lots of things that are out there of what people can do. This was just something a little bit concrete that I could do in the moment. This is a freebie pattern. It is on my blog, and I will link it down below. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Martin Luther King. This is a quote from his letter from a Birmingham jail, one of his more well-known, it's not a speech, one of his more well-known writings. You could search it online and read the whole thing if you wish. And I think, to me, it very much spoke to the time that we're having right now. You can get it on my blog. It is a freebie. What I've written there is just simply, if you choose to download it, I'm encouraging you to make a donation somewhere. Your charity of your choice, whatever feels right to you. I did list a few things that just possibilities, but it's just a thought. I know there's been some other stitching patterns that have been put out where money is being raised if you purchase them. Do what feels right to you. But this is available on my blog. There has already been some people who have stitched it this week. I have been tagged on Instagram. I have posted a few of them in my stories. I love it. It could be stitched on any fabric, any thread, whatever speaks to you, whatever you have in your stash. I'm going to take a little bit of a side turn here, so you got to kind of stick with me to understand where I'm going with this. But I have a point to make, so I hope you'll stay with me. Because last week, some period of time, I kept searching back to something that I think about a lot in my life, and I try to remind myself of a lot of the time in my life. So many people have been posting all kinds of things, helpful, useful things, on Instagram, on Facebook, in many sources. I am not the expert at all. I'm not someone who's actually been posting a lot by any means. There are plenty of people to go to find more information, more knowledge. Um, I have very much taken in the spirit of educating myself and wanting to learn. And because I've been doing a lot of that kind of thinking, I've circled back to something, like I said, that I've thought about a lot in my life. And it comes from uh, the holiday of Passover in the Jewish religion is when you have a Seder in a home. So you don't go to synagogue and have a service at a synagogue. Your service is at a home, and you use what's called a Haggadah, which is just like the booklet that walks you through the various parts of the Seder. And I was brought up Jewish. I am not going to claim to be a Judaism expert, theologian. I'm not even going to claim to be a very practicing Jewish person right now. There's a part of the Seder that is called, where you read about the four, and the proper thing nowadays, which I'm glad, is the four children. I know in the very old, outdated Haggadahs we had growing up, it was the four sons, but nowadays it's called the four children. And I definitely know growing up, it was something that I was like, you read the paragraph and, right over my head what was going on. But the four children, it's when you get to that point, and I'm going to read a little bit from something that is way more elegant than I could say out loud. But the four children, when you read this little part, it's about labels given to children about their questions. So the idea is that there are four types of children out there. There's the wise child. The wise child asks details about the specific meaning of the laws of Passover. What are we doing here? And asks very specifically, what are the testimonies, the statutes, and the laws which we have been commanded to do? And then, you could go on and respond to that. There is the wicked child. Yeah, that confused me as a kid. The wicked child asks, whatever does this mean to you? The authors admonish this child as one who is not concerned about the laws personally, but only for others. This exchange reminds us of the importance of not separating ourselves from our community or from traditions that might seem uncomfortable or foreign to us, but rather to engage with them in ways that enable us to connect with our community. So in this example, the wicked child is basically saying, I don't connect. What are you doing here? I really want to focus on the last two, however. The simple child. The simple child asks, what does this mean? So the simple child doesn't even know, how to say the details or how to ask about the specifics. It's just like, what's going on here? And then there's the fourth child, and the way it's phrased here makes so much sense. The fourth child is the child who does not know how to ask. Now, I will say, I could tell you the phrase in the Haggadahs of past. The phrase is, and the child that hath no capacity to inquire. What the hell does that mean? Like hath no capacity to inquire. You could bet that went right over my head, let alone under being able to pronounce the words. Okay, but what it is the child that doesn't even know how to ask a question. In response to that child, we are instructed to open it up and explain what is going on. Reciting the four children reminds us of the Jewish obligation to teach the next generation about this powerful story, the story of the Exodus of the Jewish people, and importantly, not to tell the story in the one way that might be easiest for us. Rather, we should invite our children to be part of the conversation, strive to meet the children where they are individually, respect the way each one learns and interacts in the world, and respond accordingly and appropriately. Through the different kinds of children and their questions, or lack thereof, we get a sense of different kinds of people as individuals and learners. There are those who are interested and find meaning in all the details. and specific rules of Passover, and perhaps too of life in general. Others don't connect to these rituals, while some want to understand the basics, and still others who might be overwhelmed or not interested enough to participate. A key message of the 4 children is that all are welcome at our Seder, all should be taught, and we should strive to embrace all learners in the experience of the Seder and the story of Passover. There's wisdom in the idea that we should open it up for the one who does not know how to ask. How can we find creative ways to open the story of Passover with all its history, values, and relevance to today, to all those who are eager to learn? In addition, there are pieces of each of the 4 children in all of us. In specific situations, we might feel more wise, wicked, simple, or not know how to ask. And in these scenarios, the dominant characteristic may influence how we think or behave. The 4 children remind us that all of these attributes are legitimate and valid, and it is our responsibility to respond in ways that are most appropriate at a given time, helping our children, our community, the next generation, and ourselves. There have been so many times in my life where, sure, I feel like I'm asking the wise child question, thinking about it, analyzing it, trying to get the details. I am being the wise child. I want to hope I'm not the wicked child. Are there times that everyone has those moments? Sure. But I know there are times where I am the simple child, where I don't even know how to ask, or not how to, where I simply say, I'm overwhelmed. What's going on here? And then there are times when I'm like, maybe it's naivete, innocence, where I just need to sit back and soak it in. And there are times where, so not even just from my perspective, there are times where I've been somewhere where I've observed somebody and I know that they're asking a question from the simple child perspective, and all I could do is do my best to respond. Or someone is asking a question, or is not asking a question, is being there from the perspective of the, I don't even know how to ask the question. I'll put it in the perspective of needlework. Have you ever been around someone who has no knowledge of needlework whatsoever? And you know that you have a piece of paper that has a pattern on it, you have fabric, and you totally know how to translate that, and it's no big deal to you. But you're around someone that's like, what the hell's going on there? And maybe they're able to voice a question of, how do you look at that and do that? That would be like a simple child question. And I can think of a couple times where I've had people who've just like, by their facial expression, they just don't get it. Or especially when I've talked about, I have an Etsy business and I design patterns for needlework. Sometimes I just get the, huh? Okay, so for what's been going on in these last couple of weeks, while I think a lot of the time I've tried to be the wise child and searching for the right things and asking the right questions for myself, I know sometimes I'm the simple child, and I know that's out of innocence. And maybe there are parts of this that I'm being the child that doesn't even know how to ask a question, and all I can do is try and soak it in. I'm sharing all this because it's something I just think about a lot, that I try to remember about myself and about others in the world, that we don't all know what we don't know. And we need to help each other to learn what we don't know. And it's just something that helps me a lot. I've encountered an Instagram page, sort of a friend of a friend of a friend kind of, but anyway, it's a great source. And I'll link it below. It's My White Friend Will Have This Convo. And I think this is a great description. Now it's not up on my screen, but I'll bring it up in a second. And it was created white and non-black POCs, friends, having conversations on race with white folks to give our black friends a break. There's You can text or call this number, and there are people who are willing to have conversations with you so as to not overwhelm Black people at this time, African Americans. It's just, and there's some great things that have been posted on this Instagram page. For example, someone who was really struggling on how to talk about all of this with their child, a 4-year-old child, age appropriate, but wanting to, and not wanting to overburden her friends, her Black friends, but have a conversation with someone who knows how to introduce it. So I just wanted to introduce that Instagram page to you. And also wanted to share with you, now I should have started with saying this, I am by no means, I think I did say this, there's so many more people who are sharing so many more things, more relevant, modern, in the moment, this is what is going on. Here is a direct way you can be doing something. I will say that I am very limited in funds at this time. I am not someone that could give massive donations, but I can do what I can do, and that's the education piece. I think a lot about kids. The timing of this is the idea of trying to wrap up a school year and all the things that are important to that, especially the way this school year has gone, and wanting to address what's going on in our country at the same time, but also needing to wrap, I mean, there's so much that kids are dealing with at this time. Backing up, I wanted to mention another thing that went through my head as I was going through walks this week, that if you haven't heard about, maybe it's something you could look into. I know I first learned about this in college, a social psychology class. There was a woman, I looked this up. She appears to still be alive, although I've done the math, and she'd be in her late 80s right now, named Jane Elliott. She was a teacher for, I think, about 20 years, and then she left teaching in schools to kids to do good work in other ways, teaching in another kind of way. And she evolved what is often called the blue-eye, brown-eye experiment. There is a video, I'll link it below, and there's a background story. She started doing this in 1968 with third graders, and it was in response to the assassination of Martin Luther King. She taught in a small town in Iowa, under 1,000 people, all white. And she wanted her students to understand what discrimination was. And how do you teach it to third grade? How do you not teach it? How do you help third graders understand? And especially when all they know are white people. There's a story behind how it became known outside of her small little community. The third year she did it, it was filmed. And I'm a little confused of exactly who showed it at first, but right now you can find it on the PBS website, which I'll link below, although it's probably on YouTube in some version also. And if you want to watch it, this is what I need to say to you. You need to get over the fact that this would not make it in a school these days. A teacher would not be allowed to do what she did. There would be serious questions about the psychological harm she would do to these kids. Basically, she acknowledged that there are two different kinds of kids in this classroom, brown eyes and blue eyes. And I forget which way she did it first, but I think those blue-eyed kids are better. Those brown-eyed kids, they don't know what they're doing. Blue-eyed kids get 5 more minutes of recess. Blue-eyed kid, and it was amazing. The next day, brown-eyed kids are better. Brown-eyed kids get 5 more minutes of recess, and so on. And they show her having the debriefing afterwards. And what's really neat about this is that they were able to gather, some years later, when those kids were, I think it must have been like their 5-year high school reunion. I think it's when they're like in their mid-20s. A group of them came together. They watched the film of themselves, and they talked about the impact it had on them. Now, I know when I saw it in college, there was definitely this dated feel to it. Okay. And so it's that much more dated now. It is not the most recent, there's so many more relevant to modern day things here. But it is very powerful to see the effect on kids, especially when you are in an environment that you don't know it any other way. These were all white kids in a very all white community. She's a fascinating woman to read about. There's certainly controversy what she did, especially to young kids. And this was way before a time where, parent things needed to be signed off. And, what was the psychological damage to how she treated them? And, okay. What she did with sort of the second half of her life was doing adult training in the same sort of way. And so part of the video that I'll link below, the PBS version, shows her doing an adult training session and how she gets adults to start acting the way you don't want to believe they would act, and help give them a real dose of, you got to be aware of your actions. So it's another piece that is worth exploring. Again, not the most modern, not the most relevant to actual events going on right now, but it might be part of your exploring that's out there. The last little thing I wanted to share, I posted about this on Instagram. I've learned about it from other people. There are some videos on YouTube. I'll link to one by Zoe, and I forget the last name, that are raising money. And like I said, if I don't have a lot of funds available right now to be doing a lot in terms of donations, this is something I can do. Hit play on a video, let it play. There are a lot of ads, and all the revenue raised, through the YouTube ads is going toward various charities at this time. Now, do your due diligence. I believe many of these are fully correct and appropriate. I think this Zoe one is, especially because what it plays out is artwork through the video. YouTube kind of clicked through a bunch when I wasn't paying attention, and there was one that came up that was just showing a screen that said, all proceeds will go to Black Lives Matter or something, but there was nothing else there, and I really questioned it. So do your due diligence. But I've literally all day for the last few days, whenever I haven't needed to use the computer, use the iPad, or when I could have it playing in the background, I've just had videos playing. If those few cents could add up to be helpful, why not? All right, that was a lot that I just threw in here. If you stayed with me to the end, thank you so much. I do not have all the answers. I have a heavy heart, like so many people do right now. I just want to keep learning, and I just want to keep pondering. I do want to keep moving forward. I do need to and do practice self-care, because that's the only way I know I can move forward and keep going. The combination of the quarantine, the pandemic, and the reality of our country and our world right now has hit me very hard, as it has many, and we got to take care of each other. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the likes and the subscribes and the comments, which I so appreciate. Till next time.